yesterday, me and Jason, we interviewed a guy by the name of Jason Lisle. Does anybody know Jason Lisle? His name? No. He's creationist and a PhD physicist, astronomer. He's math. He's got 2 majors in physics. He's a smart guy. Anyway, we got a chance to interview him yesterday, and what kind of segued into what we're going to do today is the idea that God has created things from the beginning. He's one of my favorites. He's a young earther. Not that makes much difference, but he was going over yesterday the fact that the James Webb Telescope has now identified galaxies far out beyond where they had seen them with just the Hubble. But the interesting part of it was that he found, and Jay will let him expound on it a little bit, he found that the galaxies at the edge, where astronomy and let's assume the Big Bang would predict that the galaxies far out would be globular, they wouldn't be really well formed, and they would only have light elements, helium, hydrogen, and lithium. That's what their prediction would stand, because they were the first ones that came out of the Big Bang, and the Big Bang wouldn't produce heavy elements. On the contrary, what they actually found was the fact that these galaxies were large, well-formed, and had heavy elements in them. So this leads me to believe, as I've always thought, that Genesis chapter 4 was where God made all the stars of heaven. And what segue is it to me is the fact that the entire document that we call the First Testament, I call Old Testament, but I just call it the first. Just I've gotten used to that for some reason. When I'm in Israel, Pastor Bob that's here, he said it's best to just call it the First Testament when you're in Israel, because the people, if you say it's Old Testament, then it's out of force type thing. Maybe I've used up, throw it away. We don't feel that way at all. But anyway, the First Testament, when you consider all the things that have gone on with it, like I said, in Genesis chapter 1, it talks about the creation of the entire universe. And after that, it switches over to creating things on earth, all the plants, the trees, the animals, us. And from there it comes to the fall. And the story just continues on. And it's very in depth, as you guys know. But the interesting part to me is, and what this gentleman that Dirk found, that wrote a book about this, that called the Christ Key, and the author was
Chadberg.
That guy. Anyway, he had this idea that since the transformation of the Mediterranean area into Christians, they didn't do that from the Second Testament. They did it from the First Testament. And when the Second Testament did come along, as you read it, you'll notice that throughout there is references to the Old Testament. What I found that this guy called it was intertextuality, long word, but what I'm trying to get at is that it's a flow from the start, when God created everything, like the galaxies that I was talking about. Everything else leads down to a manger that's in Bethlehem. That's where everything is. The whole entire production of the stars and everything else leads to a little tiny manger in Bethlehem, where Messiah is going to come from. And that just shook me to think that I had been, I get it. I know that the Old Testament, I've learned that. But I didn't really gather the entire concept of all that stuff, everything that was done in the First Testament, including the galaxies, the stars, the planets, black holes, and all the rest of it, all came down. God created every bit of it for us to understand that it's all going to come down to a manger in Bethlehem. That just astounded me to the point where I was like, wow, that's amazing to me. But tell me how you feel about it, Jay. Tell me where you go.
First of all, I did learn a lot from Jason Lisle. He had some interesting insights. So that video's up on the YouTube channel.
It is, yeah. And we'll get it around.
It's a little over an hour long, and I think you'd enjoy that. One of the things that it was a kind of a source of confusion is Genesis 1:1, where it said that God created the heavens and the earth. And in my mind, when you use the word heavens, that meant the stars, and then later it's let there be light. And it's hard for me to understand how can there be stars without light. But in quizzing Dr. Lisle about this, his take or his interpretation is that when it says that God created the heavens and the earth, if the earth was created, that matter, but when the Bible says heavens, that's just referring to space itself, and that later God filled the heavens, so to say, with the galaxies
On the
and
fourth
all
day.
the other matter that we find out there. And so there's a number of takeaways from that. A couple. One is that God provided the original light. It wasn't until the fourth day that the sun and the stars were created, and he believes that it's because so many pagan religions worship their sun worshipers. He in the biblical account is making clear that he is the ultimate source of light, not the sun, for example. The other takeaway from that is that all of this was for the planet Earth. The Earth was formed first. My interpretation of that is simply that we are the focal point of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And when you read some of these cosmological writings, that we're placed in a particular part of the universe, in a particular part of the galaxy that enables us to observe, to be able to put a James Webb telescope in the sky, to even see any of it. We did 2 interviews with astrophysicists. And so on the Defend Your Faith Areopagus channel, you have to go to the channel. One is Dr. Hugh Ross, was the first one, and that's on Noah's Flood Revisited. Ross, R-O-S-S.
Yeah.
And then yesterday we interviewed a second astrophysicist, Jason Lisle, L-I-S-L-E. Now, both of these men are believers. Hugh Ross is an old Earth. He believes in the billions of years of the universe and an old age of the Earth. Jason Lisle is a young universe, young Earth guy, but they both love Jesus.
They do.
But they just have these opposing views. And for me, it was kind of fascinating to hear, their kind of differences. And I think it would be good if you're wading into this and have any interest, start with Ross and then go to Lisle, which we did yesterday, because we asked him to respond to a lot of what Dr. Ross's positions are. And it's real interesting, and everybody can draw their own conclusions about all of this.
And the neat part about it is they're friends.
Right.
They don't dislike each other. They just have some disagreements on aspects of the creation. And when we were interviewing him, he says, no, Dr. Ross, I like him. He's a nice guy. I just have some differences in some of the stuff that he talks about. They don't have the differences in whether Jesus was crucified or not. They're condemned together on that. They're both believers. They both love Jesus Christ, and they're both evangelicals as well. They're trying to get people to believe that God did in fact do all this and came to the point where we've been talking about that manger in Bethlehem. But they both try to get to the same place. They just have some different ideas on how things may have happened to go out that way.
And it's a reminder that there's a lot of high-level scientists that are believers. They're not just believing God, but they're followers of Jesus Christ.
Right.
And a lot of lay people that are sciencey, because you probably heard what I've heard. Well, I'm not religious. I believe in science. And here we have really legitimate scientists that believe the Bible, believe in Scripture, and believe in Jesus for salvation.
And we started out asking both of them the same question. You're a PhD physicist. You are an extremely intelligent guy, but you believe that Jesus rose from the dead and is God? Because that's what we asked him. We straight asked them straight out, and both of them had the same reaction. Like Jason had yesterday. I'm not too familiar with what Dr. Ross said, but Jason Liddell says, "Well, yeah, I don't have any problem with that because science is a study of things that we can observe and repeat." And he said, "History, you can't do that. We're not. We can make our assumptions of what may have happened in the past, but science isn't what we make from there. What we make from there is what we can try to detect. But what real science is, observable and repeatable, that goes out the window at the start of the universe. That's not something we know."
And we need to be clear that to distinguish between a scientific materialist and a scientist who's open to the immaterial realm.
Yes.
I mean, this scientific materialism has gotten so bad that there are people out there, scientists, who deny the existence of the human soul.
Yeah.
Well, once you do that, how relevant are you for somebody that wants to know about the destiny of their own soul?
Yeah. Very much so. Yeah, Jason.
So what I would say is uh, just comparing you, Ross, and Jason Lisle. I think what was interesting too is how they both made very good points. I agree with things about each of them, but it's interesting how Jason's creation model, I think he made a really good argument for it biblically. But then with you, Ross, what he did is he got into why God would send the flood and about judgment and how judgment works. And that was really insightful too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in some ways you can almost like borrow from each of them. And I know probably one or the other creation model is probably correct. But at the same time, there's like whichever one's correct, there's things you can gain from the other one. If that makes sense.
Yeah,